All right, let's dive in. We're going deep on Orange is the New Black today.
Hi.
A show that, honestly, went beyond just entertainment. It sparked important discussions. We've got excerpts here, really insightful stuff. By the end of this, you'll see this show in a whole new way.
You hit the nail on the head with that beyond entertainment thing. This show, it did something really unique, authentically portraying a marginalized community,
Hmm.
but also critiquing the system that marginalized them.
Yeah. And right off the bat, the diversity of the cast hits you. It felt so refreshing to see a show that actually mirrored the U.S. prison population.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about, like, checking off diversity boxes either. They went deeper than surface level, gave these characters backstories, motivations, even internal conflicts. It felt so real.
And that's where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about showing different facing. It's about humanizing the people behind those faces. They became individuals with stories that deserve to be heard,
Right.
not just inmates.
Exactly. Like, take Tasty. You see her journey through the foster care system, right? Her struggle to fit in outside of prison. She becomes so much more than just an inmate. You understand how the system failed her, how her choices weren't always just her own, you know?
It's like the show is making us face our own biases, making us ask how much of who we are is because of where we were born.
Precisely. And then there's Pennsatucky. Her story's steeped in poverty, rural poverty, and religious extremism. It reminds you that ending up in prison isn't simple. It's often about societal inequalities paving the way.
The show doesn't shy away from those tough truths, does it? It makes us see the systemic stuff that leads to mass incarceration.
And it blurs the lines really masterfully between victim and perpetrator. Think about Piper Chapman. She could have been just a privileged outsider, but they use her to show the disparities in the system.
Her being a fish out of water, it highlights how differently the system treats people based on background, on privilege.
And it's fascinating how they use her naivety to pull the audience in. We see the injustices through her eyes. It makes us question our own ideas about who goes to prison and why.
It's so clever, getting viewers invested in characters they might usually dismiss.
Totally. And it speaks to that overall goal, right? Challenging viewers to look past stereotypes, to see the humanity in those society pushes aside.
Okay, so we've talked about how the show handled representation and how it humanized these characters, but it also didn't hold back on critiquing the prison system itself. These excerpts really show how Orange is the New Black exposed the flaws, the injustices of that whole prison industrial complex.
It's like they did all this research and then figured out, how do we make this into a story that grabs people?
Because reading stats about prison overcrowding, private prisons profiting, it can be dry. But seeing those same issues through relatable characters, that's what makes it stick.
Exactly. Remember that storyline about the private prison company cutting corners to make more money? It was infuriating to watch, but it showed a real problem with for-profit prisons.
Right. Suddenly these concepts, corporate greed, systemic injustice, they had a human face. The impact of those policies felt real, immediate.
And it went beyond just highlighting problems and made you think about solutions. Like, okay, if this is happening, what can we do to change it?
And that's where Orange is the New Black truly excels. It manages to entertain, educate, empower all at once. It stays with you long after you've finished watching.
It created a dialogue, a conversation that went way beyond the TV screen. It became a cultural moment, pushing people to talk about criminal justice reform, social equity.
But before we go too far down that road, let's go back a bit. How did they manage to tackle such heavy stuff without it feeling totally bleak? Prison life isn't exactly happy, right?
That's where the brilliance of the show's tone comes in. Orange is the New Black found this balance between dark humor and deep emotion. One minute you're laughing, the next you're reaching for tissues.
There's this one scene, I won't spoil it, but it involves a chicken. And it perfectly captures that blend of humor and sadness. The show did that so well.
It's like they knew that even in the darkest places, humanity finds a way to shine through. And sometimes laughter is how we cope.
And it never felt forced or disrespectful.
Mhm.
It always came naturally from the characters, their situations.
Exactly. They understood that to truly connect, you have to embrace all of the human experience. The laughter, the tears, the anger, the hope. It's what makes us human.
And speaking of hope, Orange is the New Black didn't just leave us feeling despairing. It showed the resilience of the human spirit, too.
Even facing adversity, the characters supported each other. They found moments of joy, fought for their dignity.
It's like a reminder, even in the toughest situations, there's always a flicker of light, a reason to keep going, especially powerful given the setting of a prison.
And that resonated with people. It's no surprise Orange is the New Black went beyond just a show. It became a cultural
It
phenomenon.
got people talking, challenged what they thought. Ultimately, it left a real mark on television, but we'll get more into that impact in the next part of our deep dive.
It's kind of wild how they managed to capture both those things, right? The big systemic issues and the individual struggles in prison. Not just showing the flaws, but reminding us there are real people in there. Real people with hopes and dreams, complicated pasts.
It's like they were holding up a mirror to society, kinda, forcing us to see the humanity in those we often ignore, or
Yeah.
even worse, dehumanize.
Exactly. And one of the ways they did that, those flashbacks, remember how we'd get glimpses of their lives before prison?
Oh yeah, those flashbacks were crucial to understanding their choices, what motivated them. It added layers to the characters. They became real people, not just inmates.
Like Daya, for example. In the present, she's stuck in this tough situation. But then the flashbacks show her younger, more vulnerable, dealing with a difficult family. It makes her actions make more sense, even if you don't agree with them.
Right, it's those glimpses into their pasts. That really hit home the idea that no one is born a criminal. It's poverty, trauma, lack of opportunities, systemic racism, so many factors.
It's like the show was saying, hey, there's more to the story. Don't judge a book by its cover.
And that makes the critique of the system even stronger. It's not just about bad guards or conditions. It makes you question the whole foundation of the system, a system that often just keeps people trapped in poverty and prison.
Absolutely. It doesn't give easy answers or preachy solutions, but it makes you think critically about these issues and your own role in them.
There's this one storyline that really sticks with me. It's Sophia Bursett, the transgender inmate played by Laverne Cox, and the awful way she's treated by the staff.
So powerful and so heartbreaking. It showed the discrimination transgender people face, even in a place that's supposed to be about rehabilitation.
And it wasn't made up. They worked with transgender advocates, used real experiences
Yeah.
to make it authentic and to raise awareness.
It's remarkable how they balanced those heavier storylines with lighter moments, humor. Like they understood that humor can be a coping mechanism, finding light in the darkness.
Yeah. That scene where they organize a beauty pageant, hilarious, but also heartwarming, showing their resilience, finding joy even in prison.
Exactly. It defied expectations, right? You'd think a show about women's prison would be all grim, but it was also funny, heartwarming, even hopeful sometimes.
And that mix of tones, that's a big part of why it resonated so much. It wasn't just a lecture about social justice. It was about human nature, all its complexities.
It took viewers into a world they probably never thought about, challenged their biases, their assumptions, and it did it all while being entertaining.
So we've talked about the storytelling, humanizing the inmates, the critique of the prison system, but let's talk about the cultural impact of Orange is the New Black.
Mhm.
This show went way beyond entertainment. It sparked a national conversation about mass incarceration, social justice, reform.
Absolutely. It wasn't just something to talk about around the water cooler. It was a catalyst for real change in the world. It brought issues that were hidden out into the open, made people confront uncomfortable truths about our society.
Right. When it premiered, everyone was talking about it.
Yeah.
Prison reform became a hot topic. Racial disparities in sentencing, exploitation in private prisons, these were being discussed everywhere.
And it wasn't just talk. The show gave a platform to formerly incarcerated people, activists, organizations working to change the system. It fueled a movement, pushed for reforms, policy changes.
It's amazing that a TV show could have that kind of impact.
Yeah.
It shows the power of stories, not just to entertain, but to educate, inspire, empower.
And it changed the entertainment industry, too. It showed that audiences want diverse, complex stories. And it paved the way for other shows that focus on marginalized voices, tough issues.
Like, you can't imagine a show like Pose happening without it. With its exploration of LGBTQ plus culture, the ballroom scene.
And it's more than just representation. Orange is the New Black proved a show with a mostly female cast, many of them women of color, could be a huge success.
It challenged what people thought audiences wanted and proved there's a market for stories that reflect the real world.
And that legacy continues. Shows like this have inspired a new generation of creators to push boundaries, challenge norms, use their platform to amplify silenced voices.
Like they opened a door and said, there are so many stories out there, don't be afraid to tell them.
And that's powerful because the stories we tell, the voices we amplify, the perspectives we embrace, they shape how we understand the world and our place in it.
So wrapping up this part of our deep dive, it's worth asking ourselves, how can we as viewers, as citizens, keep this conversation going? How can we use our own voices for change? to create a more just and equitable society? That's a big question, right? Like Orange is the New Black give us this amazing start, but what do we do next?
Well, I think being more aware of what we watch is a good first step. We have so much power as viewers to choose content that reflects our values, makes us think,
Yeah.
content that gives a voice to those who aren't always heard.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's more than just watching, right? It's about talking about these shows, recommending them, using whatever platform we have, even just social media.
It's like creating this ripple effect. Each conversation, each post adds to something bigger.
Exactly. And as we look for those new stories, those new perspectives, I think it's key to remember what Orange is the New Black taught us about empathy.
Absolutely. It reminded us that everyone has a story, that even people who've made mistakes, they're still human. We need to look past those labels, those stereotypes, and see the world from the perspective of those who are often pushed to the margins.
And that kind of empathy, it's essential, not just for better storytelling, but for better society too.
It is. It really is. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, admitting our own biases, and being open to listening to those with different experiences, learning from them.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Orange is the New Black, I want to leave you with this thought. This show was groundbreaking, for sure, but it was just the beginning.
There are so many more stories to be told, so many perspectives we need to hear, stories about immigrants, people with disabilities, mental health, and so much more.
And it's on us, as viewers, as citizens, to find those stories, lift up those voices, to demand more from the media we consume.
Because when we embrace diversity, when we challenge the way things are, when we prioritize empathy and understanding, that's how we make real change happen.
That's it for our deep dive into Orange is the New Black. We hope this has got you thinking about the power of stories, about how important representation is, and the role we all play in creating a more just and equitable world. Thanks for joining us.